Firebase. My talk's called Data on Fire because I really, I love Firebase. I use it. I'm a web developer first. I used to be Android, and I kind of balance both. But the reason I wanted to talk about data is that a lot of the recent announcements in the Firebase area have been very focused on data. So we're going to try to do two things today. We're going to have a talk where we kind of cover what's Firebase, what's new in it for the first half, and then do a deep dive into the Cloud Firestore for the second half. Last question of the day, am I talking too slowly? Okay, all right, I asked. All right, so let's get started. Just some housekeeping. If you do say or do anything, tweet about this, please hashtag it Data on Fire if you can, because I collect all these and I use them to improve myself next time. It also makes it really easy for me to go back and see questions that you've asked that you didn't have a chance to ask. Second thing, in all my life, I have never yet finished on time. It's something I work on. So if you don't have a chance for questions, don't worry, I will be around. Come talk to me. I love, love, love talking to people. So I'd encourage you to do that. A little bit about me. I'm actually a PhD in computer engineering, but I've spent almost 2 decades, no more than 2 decades in software. I came from research and distributed systems through mobile computing research into web development, and now I kind of balance a couple of things, both mobile web and a little bit of entrepreneurship. I'm also a community manager around the Google Developer Group in New York City and the one in Hudson Valley. And I'm a mom. It's really important because a lot of the stuff I do because I think the next generation needs to be better than us. I'm really, really passionate about helping small businesses. Where I live in Hudson Valley, it's not New York City, right? So it's very easy for you to throw a rock in New York City and 50 people will say, hey, I know this stuff. In Hudson Valley, we kind of wanted to get more people to learn. So I'm passionate about helping local communities and local businesses build stuff and be ready for the new technology ecosystem. My goal today, and I wasn't really certain about the audience, was to split this into 2 things. If you are a beginner in Firebase, if you don't know what it is, hopefully what you'll get out of it is, what is Firebase and what's new in 2017, right? If you already know Firebase, hopefully what you'll get out of it is, as a developer, what are my data options and how do I get started with Firestore? So let's go with the beginner stuff first, right? What is Firebase and why should I care? So I want to actually set you up with the kind of narrative that motivates me to do this stuff. So let's all assume that you're here. You're all a developer, right? And maybe like me, many of you build and deploy mobile and web apps. So I want to introduce you to 2 kinds of customers that I usually have. The first one is, all of these are Indian names because, all right, Maya is she's a small business owner. She runs a hair salon, and she wants people to build her an app, right? Because everybody wants an app these days. So she's like, hey, I want someone to build an app. Can someone build this for me? Remember, this is a small business owner. So the other side of the equation is Gita. For what it's worth, for those of you who are curious about this thing, Maya means magic in my mother tongue, and Gita means music, just in case you were curious. So here she's a gamer, and what she's interested in is, hey, do you have a cool new game for me to play? I'm looking for a new challenge. I'm like bored with all the stuff I have. I'm looking for something new. Typically, these are the 2 kinds of customers you have. One where you're directly building for the end customer. The other way you're building for someone who's actually working with the end customer. And if you're like me, you're like, yeah, I can do that. I know this stuff. Me, pick me, right? And then you're like, okay, just tell me your requirements. And this is when everything comes to a screeching halt, right? So let's go to the requirements. And this, by the way, turns out to be very, very familiar with a lot of people. So if she's a hair salon owner with a physical store, her requirements are going to be like this, right? She's like, hey, I want an app that helps my customer make appointments to come into my salon. Oh, and by the way, it should send an alert if an appointment suddenly became available. Oh, and also, I want to let you know all hair salons have hair products, right? She's like, I know that people will buy stuff during Thanksgiving. I want to be able to sell these through that app as well, right? And then she's like, can you also, that reminds me, can we send coupons? And can we then allow that person to then share the coupon with a friend so maybe I get more customers? Sound familiar? Any of you? Yes, yeah. They all want more than they can afford, but anyway, we won't go there. And then finally she says, you know what, and I'm sorry for all the Android people in the room. She's like, a lot of our customers use iOS, and some of them don't even have an Android phone, so can you build me stuff that work on both mobile and web, right? And then she throws the kicker in, it should be cheap to maintain, because I'm a small business owner, I don't know tech, I want someone else to manage it all for me, can they do it? And you're like, okay, let's translate this. Make appointments, that's really about, I need something where I can read, write, and modify database, right? Cool, I got that. We can figure out where to use that. Send alerts, oh, I need you to push push notifications. I'm sure somebody has a service for it, so it's viable. Yeah, I can do that. I want to show and sell products. That really means I now need to put in media storage. I need places to store files of images and all that stuff. Okay, great, I can do that. Send and share coupons. Oh, now I need to know authentication. I need to know the identity of the user, who they're sending it to, how to do invites, etc. Mobile and web coverage means that whatever solution I use has to be able to work across platform, right? Whatever their front end is, I need to somehow, at some point, be able to support that user. And cheap to maintain, for me at least these days, means serverless, right? Hey, let's throw more at the cloud because it'll scale and it'll be effectively cheap, because you're going to be paying for the minimum on-demand usage versus having to maintain it without use, right? Now let's go to Nitya. She kind of has similar things, but like little small things different. She says, hey, I want to play across devices. I want to start my game on my Android phone, go home, I have an iPad, I want to go out there, I want to continue the game, and it should take me back from exactly the screen I was in with my scores and playing with the same friends I was playing with. Sure. Alerts to new levels, yes, everyone wants that. She's a gamer, so she's like, hey, I also want to be notified if there are power buys, things that I can buy to like really amp my skills. I want to invite friends to play with me. And then, every gamer I know wants this. I want to get to a point where you recognize I'm the boss of this game. Stop showing me all the beginner stuff, personalize the experience to me. And finally, every gamer gets bored. They're like, okay, I'm bored. And now you need like, what are the special rewards that keep you motivated to stay and keep working with me, right? How many of you still play Disney's Where's My Water? Yeah, I have. So my translation on this, when you say play across devices, it really means I want data to be synchronized across them, right? So I really am looking for something where I can do real-time data sync across my clients. Push notifications we talked about. Power buys, that's really about analytics. How do I understand like who's buying what and how do I increase the conversion events? Because at the end of the day, none of us are doing this for free, right? We want to make money. So we need to understand how we can optimize those. User auth, we talked about, and invite same as before. But personalization, that's an interesting one. How do we kind of minimize our effort as developers, but allow that experience to be tailored to all the various things, like different levels within a game, different kinds of people, genders, ethnicities, who knows? And finally, for the rewards part, rewards is really kind of a retention gimmick, right? It's a loyalty gimmick. So we really want to understand and predict at what point is this person going away, and most importantly, I want you to remember this when we'll talk about it later, is that it's about understanding who's more important when I give a reward. You don't want to give the Lamborghini to the person who's played a game once. You want to give them stickers. You want to give the Lamborghini to the person who spent $1 million in your app. And the fact that you all think that giving a Lamborghini is easy, I don't know what to say about you. You're different from my crowd. All right. So, one small thing. My customers tell me all this, and then they come back and say, oh, by the way, I have limited budget, I want this in 4 weeks, and I also will have lots of changes for you. That's okay, right? And you're like, not really. It's not. You can't be serious. This stuff is way too much thing that you're putting on my head. But then you start asking yourself, is it really too much? Is there some way I can outsource a lot of the back stuff? Right? Like many of these services that exist, can I outsource it? And this is really where Firebase comes in, right? What Firebase is, and this is kind of like the marketing spiel from their side, but really it's a platform that helps you build mobile and web apps and grow your business. And the big thing about the Firebase platform is that it keeps evolving. It keeps adding more and more services. But if I want to kind of step back and say, what exactly is it that it's valuable for? I'm going to look at it from 3 tiers. The top part is from their marketing speak. The bottom part is how I see it. One, it allows me to outsource my DevOps, right? Infrastructure management, they take care of the backend. They used to call it backend-as-a-service. Now they kind of have evolved from that. But effectively, I use Firebase because I don't have to manage the backend. I can create accounts for every customer. I can basically move that around, and I don't worry about scale. They're going to scale it for me. Second, every day is a new hack, implicit security. All the connections in Firebase are OHTTPS. There's rules and access controls built in for most of the products. And so from my perspective, that's one less thing I have to be accountable for. And finally, the big kicker is the frictionless integrations, right? Every day there's a new requirement from a customer, and you're like, hey, I need one more new thing I need to build. If someone's already built it and given me an API or a library, and that really fits into automatically all the data models and things that I have, that's beautiful, and that's what they do. So what that lets me do as a developer is I focus on the front end. I don't worry about the back end. And the nice thing about Firebase is that it actually is supporting a wealth of frontends. So it doesn't matter if you're an Android developer, an iOS developer, web, C++, Unity, there's an SDK for you. And more importantly, many of these SDKs being open sourced, and in the web space, there's literally vertical plugins coming. So if you're a Polymer person, there's Polymer Fire. You're an Angular person, there's Angular Fire. You are a React person, there's React Fire, right? So effectively, you focus on your front-end logic, but even the part where you have to talk to the back-end is abstracted away for you under really nice, easy-to-use APIs. Make sense? I only ask questions once in a while so I can slow myself down. All right. So the only thing you do is you focus on the front end and then you integrate in the back end. And so we're going to do a really quick and dirty kind of look at what's in the back end in Firebase. Very recently, I think like literally October 30th when they had the event, they unveiled this, they're going to classify this into 2 buckets now. There used to be 3. And those 2 big buckets are develop and test or grow and engage. In develop and test, you're really looking at what it means as a developer to build and performance optimize your app, right? These are all the different products that are in there. Most importantly, Firebase really integrates very seamlessly with Google Cloud. And I just say this because it means that things that are on Google Cloud are likely to slowly keep creeping in. So if you're looking at things like, for instance, BigQuery is not really shown here, but there is a seamless integration with BigQuery for the things that matter, right? So from the perspective of develop and test, what can you do? As a developer, you've got your database, you've got the ability to do hosting, you've got the ability to do serverless through functions, you've got authentication built in. I'm not going to go into all of these in detail, obviously, but authentication means that you can not only use things like your own email password and even anonymous, but you can now use Twitter or X, Twitter Fabric's digits, authenticate with phone numbers. You can also do anonymous, and you can use any of the service providers, GitHub, Google, Facebook, whatever, very seamlessly, few lines of code. In addition to this, from the testing part, the one thing they announced recently is Crashlytics is now like the flagship integration for analytics, for crash management. They also had a crash reporting service before, which I think might kind of get backburnered soon. There's a test lab for Android, so you can actually write your Android app and have it tested out across a bunch of devices, different form factors, and performance monitoring. On the marketing side, I call it marketing, but really, nobody nowadays can actually say you're not a marketer. Because when you build an app, you're not going to get it out there if you don't sell it. And by selling it means not necessarily going out there and putting billboards. It means understanding your user, understanding what about your app was meaningful to them, changing it so that you're always delivering the best experience. And so there are 2 parts in this. One is first make them aware of your app. Make them know you exist, right? You can't just build it and put it on the store and expect people to show up. Second is, once you have built it and they have installed it, how do you keep them there and then how do you make money off of them, right? So in that space, one of the most important integrations that you can get here is that from the growth space, there's a lot of like seamless messaging, alerts, invites, all those things, dynamic links, right, that allow awareness to be fairly seamless, plus integration with AdWords, which is Google's big advertising, like make it like show this up when people use these keywords in search. From the engage side, like from the making money side, integration with ads, also the ability to use analytics and predictions. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So bottom line, this was your intro, this was your rapid fire intro to Firebase. It's really, you build an app, you got the tools to test it, then you got the tools to monetize it. So what's new in 2017? So this one really is kind of hot off the presses because the Firebase Summit just happened on October 30th, which is 2 weeks ago. So some of the stuff was kind of very new. Some of it was just announced but had been known. And there was a lot, but I'm not going to pick on all of it. I'm actually going to just talk about a few things that I really thought were very important. At a very high level, if you look at the keynote, and by the way, I'll put the slides up on my account at Nitya, so all of these have links, you can go watch them later. But I just want you to have a very high level kind of gut instinct for where is this going and what's important. At a very high level, the Crashlytics integration was a big item. It means that, how many of you use Crashlytics? Oh, awesome. So now that's going to become the de facto engine. That means that all the stuff that you've been doing will port pretty seamlessly. Other things are, we'll look at the Firebase console a little later, but there's a brand new way for you to like look at the console and look and find things on the back end to manage your back end itself. A prediction service. Anyone know about the prediction service? Oh, yay, okay. So the prediction service was actually, if I pick one thing from that event, that was the hot news. It is both creepy and compelling at the same time, and I'll talk about it later. A/B testing, which, how many of you do A/B testing regularly as part of your work? Awesome. And do you micromanage it yourself? You write your own, or do you use tools? 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 Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and then we're going to dive into Firestore and stay there. So, predictions. I personally loved it until I was freaked out by it. The insight that they start with is saying that it's easier for an app developer to retain users than it is for them to acquire new ones. In other words, once you've got people in the door, hang on to them, right? It's harder for you to go find new people to come in. But if you can keep these people happy, that's actually better. And the way prediction does it is it uses the analytics data that you're already getting for free if you're using an Android app with Firebase. Turning it on, it's a one kind of switch thing that says, hey, yes, I want analytics. Once it's turned on, it's gathering usage data for you anyway. Prediction is their product building on that looks at that data over a short period of time and then tries to predict what your current user base is going to be doing. Don't look at that. This is me sketchnoting it live when I was sitting and watching it. You can go back and look at it later. But the key parts of this are as follows. What they do is they take a 100-day window of analytics data, and they use that. They look at the labels and the users, and they use that to predict behaviors for the users over the next 7 days. Once they've predicted users' behaviors, then 10 days after the prediction, they will actually tell you how accurate they were, right? So you can get a sense of how good or bad they are. But until then, you have these predictions. What do you do with them, right? So the first thing is like there are labels. So spenders versus churners. A spender is someone who's spending money in your app to buy, who's watching ads or maybe like buying in-app purchases. You want to kind of track what's the prediction of how many people are likely to spend stuff in my app, right? Churners, how many people are likely to leave? Those are the big labels. There could be others. How can you use this? You can use, so effectively what it's doing is for free, without you writing a single line of code, you're going to get predictions about what your users are doing. You can then use those to whatever, and then you look at it and take a decision and say, we're going to go with this variant, right? How does it do it? It uses Google Analytics to craft the audiences. It uses Google Optimize to do the A/B testing. Has statistical insights built in, so it gives you visualizations, which are really good. And they provide guidance on how you should actually pick your stuff for A/B testing. Finally, we're getting to the crux of it. I think I'm doing okay. All right. So the third product that excited a lot of people was Cloud Firestore. So how many of you have actually used Firestore? Good. Me too. Bad for me to admit it, but it's true. It's been out for a few weeks, but you kind of like, you haven't actually done production stuff with it, so I haven't broken it yet, so we'll know. How many of you use the RealTime Database though? Awesome. So the RealTime Database is what Firebase provides today, right? So the minute they put this out there, the first question to everyone was confusion. Why do we have another database, right? Why? What do I do with my old one? How do I migrate? Should I migrate? I don't know. So the reason they did it was, and we'll go into that later, but let's actually talk about what it is. First of all, it's a document-based NoSQL data store. But the real reason they did it is that it simplifies complex queries. Till now, with your original real-time database, you really couldn't do a lot in terms of querying unless you kind of knit yourself into a pretzel, cried in a corner for 3 days, came out and said, forget it, it's just going to be what it is. So it was hard. Now they're trying to make it simpler. How many of you know MongoDB? Oh, yay, okay, so if you're familiar with MongoDB, this model actually becomes much, much more familiar to you. Finally, the reason they were doing it is scalability of the queries too. So the original Firebase real-time database kind of treated data as a giant blob, right? So you would have to like really architect your model in a way that made sure that when you made a query, you went to an endpoint and got the data. You didn't get the whole database back. So scaling was really hard. Now what they're doing is they've made it possible to scale to the size of the result set, not to the size of the whole data set, which means you can actually support more users, it's faster, more performant. I draw pictures. Sue me. All right, we're not going to look at this one though. But this was actually a really, really exciting talk. If you watch one thing, I usually recommend you go watch it. But we're actually going to go dive deeper into this one. So now we come to the second part, which is, okay, I know Firebase. Okay, for those of you who didn't know Firebase, does it give you a sense of what Firebase is? Did I talk too slow? One joke, it worked, yes, okay. All right, so as a developer, what I want to look at is, hey, what are my data options in Firebase? So we're going to talk about Cloud Store, but I want to also set it up just a little bit before we get there. I drew pictures. This was drawn coming back from Deaf West Florida, soon, but I loved it. So my point was that think of Firebase as you've got this huge, and by the way, the Firebase dev advocate wrote back to me and said, are you going to hand draw every slide? And I said, no, I'm not. Next time. But what I wanted to actually kind of like envision with this is that we deal with a sea of data when we write applications, right? And when we think about data, everyone thinks it's just the application data, but it isn't. Anything that's like informational stuff that you have, assets that you have, you've got to manage this all. And so when I think about Firebase, I think of Firebase as kind of like this, this thing like that's cutting through the sea of data, and it has all these sails. Each one is giving you some additional power to make you process and move through this. What are those sails? At a very high level, I break it up into 3 big parts, right? There's app model data. This is what, when we say data for an application, is what we usually think about, right? It's like, hey, I have my model, I have my state, I want to be able to store it, sync it, blah, blah, blah. That everyone knows and is familiar with, and in Firebase, we actually have 3 products that kind of fit in this vein. The RealTime Database and Cloud Firestore both kind of compete, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But the third one, which you may not be aware of, is Firebase Auth, which is actually keeping your user profile data and your credentials and all that stuff. That's not stored in the database, it's kind of, you manage it separately. So you've got 3 different places where your state exists. And then you have app assets. Remember that hair salon lady who wanted to have pictures of all the shampoos? That doesn't go in my database. And believe me, there was actually a person I worked with who put that stuff in the database. And I'm like, but anyway, you want to be able to store it on a file storage or CDN, which would scale, which makes it accessible, right? And for that, you have 2 options. One is the cloud storage, which is really for raw assets. You want to put media, have it like hosted, scaled, etc., accessible everywhere. That's cloud storage. The second, which is more kind of vertically important, is Firebase hosting, which is literally the assets that make up your application. If you're a web app developer, you know what that means. All your index, HTML, CSS, all that stuff, you can literally host it and have it served up. Even if you're not, if you're an Android developer, maybe you're like me and you have an independent page for your app that you want to serve the APK from, you could host it, right? And finally, the third part is the activity data, which is when a user uses my app, there's a ton of data being generated for me about what they did, where they did it, when they did it, how they did it, etc. I talk too fast, don't I? All right, so, and you want to be able to make sense of that. And the 2 products in that space are Google Analytics. They used to be called Firebase Analytics, it's rebranded, and Firebase Predictions. We are not going to talk about all of that, I just wanted you to know they were there. We're going to go into Firestore. So let's talk about Firestore. It only took me 28 minutes to get here. So we're going to try to do it really simple. What is it? How should we use it? I mean, why should we use it? How do we use it? And then finally, how does it differ from the RealTime Database? So, before you get started, you need to know the history of the RealTime Database to understand why this is such a, why they came up with this. Firebase, for the longest time, was the RealTime Database, right? That RealTime Database was V0, and that's what Google bought and then converted into this platform. So to a large extent, it's almost like you're saying, I'm going to build a new human, but first I'm going to tear the heart out and put a new one in, and you're like, that thing will die without it. It didn't. It's really saying, hey, we built this product, it was the core, and we found there were flaws with it, and we want to fix them. So the core of Firebase was this NoSQL blob, right? And the reason is that it was really, really good at real-time data sync. The kinds of usage they were thinking about is, hey, I have a bunch of data, let's say cricket scores. Why did I say cricket? Anyone know what cricket is? All right, okay, fine, football scores, whatever. So you have scores, and you want this synchronized and given out to a lot of people in real time, right? So there's just one blob of data that has all of them, all the scores, and all you're doing is you're saying what changed, and I want to synchronize it to everyone. That's a great use case. That's the kind of use case that Firebase Database was built for. Real-time sync, small, like vertical, deep data, but fast synchronization. It was efficient and low latency. You had to like twist yourself into a pretzel to model it, but it was really efficient. The problem came when people started seeing Firebase, the database, as their entire persistence layer for the entire app and dumping everything into it, right? So they were beginning to see it more the way they used MongoDB. And so what happened is it didn't scale beyond 100K users. You couldn't do complex queries. And if you're building an app where you have multiple models, you want to see things across them, it was a nightmare. So the problem, great for fast sync, bad for larger apps and unified persistence. How do we solve it? This is where Firestore came in. So they have 3 big picture items in Cloud Firestore. It builds on the insights from RealTime Database. So which means that it does everything the RealTime Database does and more. So if you move to this, you're not going to lose out. However, it is in beta right now. It's not production ready, it's exploratory, whereas that Firebase has been stable for a long time. Second thing about Cloud Firestore is integrates the cloud from the get-go. So you take advantage of all the scaling that comes with cloud entities, and hopefully you'll kind of be able to extrapolate into other things later. And finally, it rethinks what that data model is. Both of them are NoSQL data stores, but the first one to me was a blob. Here, you have more structure, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So, high level, what are the pieces of Cloud Firestore? First, we're going to talk about collections and documents. That's the new model. Like, how do you actually, organize your data? Second, we're going to talk about addressable sub-collections that you might have a collection, if you're from the SQL world, you can have multiple tables and cross-index and all that. Here, it's like, hey, a collection might have a sub-collection. So if I post a picture, that picture may have comments, that comment is a sub-collection, right? So I can actually nest them. Read, write, delete, standard card behaviors, API, sort, filter, and limit. That's important because that was not easy to do the old database. Plus, we'll talk about something interesting about indexing, which is really useful for people like me who want to get things done fast. Multi-op transactions. If you actually start doing data updates where multiple collections or multiple areas of data have to be updated at the same time, how do you make that atomic? That's supported now. Scalable queries to the data set, to the result set, not to the whole data set. And finally, for the web developer in me, this made me super happy because until Firebase RealTime Database was there, you could only do offline sync with Android and iOS native. With Cloud Firestore, you can do it for the web. So in other words, it will work when you're offline, and it will continue to sync, and then when you reconnect, it will do conflict resolution and get you back on sync later. So there is no way in God's green earth I'm going to teach you everything in 20 minutes. If any of you think I can, I have a bridge in Brooklyn that I want to sell you. But I do want to say that there is a demo and a code lab. If you have time this afternoon, I hugely advocate you go through it. It takes just 30 minutes. And it's actually this demo. And a lot of the code snippets I took out were pulled out from there, so you can actually go there and look at it. The link up there is a link to the code lab that this is from. And really, it's a very simple app. A list of restaurants. Each restaurant has a rating. You want to be able to filter and sort those restaurants based on some criteria. You want to be able to look at the detail activity for a particular restaurant and then go in there and change its rating. And this is the kicker, when you change the rating of a restaurant, the average rating of the restaurant, when you add a new rating to a restaurant, its average rating should change. New rating goes into the ratings collection, average rating was in the restaurant collection. So you need to sync these up, right? Make sense? Should I just keep quiet for 5 minutes just so everyone gets a breather, like there's silence at last, there's silence at last? Okay, right. Not gonna happen. All right. Hey, I was actually here at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night and woke up at 3. So if you think this is me, and I haven't drunk coffee for 60 days, you should have seen me 3 months ago. All I'm saying. All right, so the demo for Friendlies, if you go through this demo, each of those screens, we learn a little bit about Firestore. The first one, you're going to learn about collections of documents, how you read, write data. Second one, you're going to learn about how do you do sorting, filtering, and indexing. Third one, you're going to learn about what a sub-collection means and how you actually keep that data in sync. And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about security because at the end of the day, this is all data. We want to keep it private. We want to keep it managed so that people don't get access to it that shouldn't have it. So, you know what, I'll finish the slides and I'll come back and show you the console. It might be better. But this is what it looks like. So, when you kind of set this up, Firebase has a backend and frontend. Your frontend is what you write. The backend is your project you set up. When you go on there, you'll find that, and this is interesting, you'll find that you'll get both options, both RealTime Database and Firestore. And it's a mix and match mode. You can actually have both if you like. You can add both of them into your product. You don't have to choose. But when you do pick the Firestore, it's in beta. You have to accept it and say, I want to try it. You get a dashboard that looks like that. If you work with Mongo, it might actually be kind of familiar. You can see that you can add collections, documents, and then within documents, you can add additional collections as well. We'll look through the details of that in a minute. First question, how do I get started? If you work with Android Studio, hopefully all of you have upgraded beyond 2.3. Then I would say don't even worry about it. In fact, if you ask me how to set it up manually, I have forgotten now. Because with 2.3 and above, and right now I think Studio is at 3, you actually can go into tools, pull it down, and there'll be a Firebase assistant. that slides out from the right-hand side. And I'm sorry, I like the dark color theme. I didn't realize it would look so dark here. Hopefully you can read it. What it does is it really simplifies this. It's 2 clicks to get you connected, right? So when you pull this out, what the tutorials will tell you is, hey, pick a product and use that to connect to Firebase, because you got to go to connect to Firebase through some product. I would pick analytics every time. It's the free product, you get it. If you don't use analytics in your app, what's wrong with you? Don't answer that, but that's the one I would go to. So if you go into the analytics app and you click the button, you get this kind of a dashboard, and you'll see the first thing in there says connect your app to Firebase. You click that button, it'll pop up an authentication window and say authenticate into your Firebase backend. Pick the database or pick the project you want to use with this app. You pick it, hit enter, and that's it. It sets up all the configuration data for you in Android Studio, the Gradle config, everything is done for you. You don't have to do any other work. At this point, you're connected to Firebase, right? Now you can start working on your code. So if you kind of then look, once you finish that and come back, this is what the dashboard looks like. Here are all the different products. You can go to any one of those and deep dive and see what's there. This is basically the refresh console. And now you're like, okay, within the database itself, I pick Firestore. It'll ask you whether you want to start in lock mode or test mode. Lock mode means that you're locking it down, so you at least have to be authenticated to the data. That's the standard default for pretty much everything we do these days. Nobody wants to put public data out there, so you just start that up, you get it done, and then you're at this stage. Now this is the interesting thing, is once you've got your database set up, you'll notice that in this, there is a database product. There's only one database product, but when you go in there, it'll show you a dashboard, and you can flip using the drop-down to either one. There are people who are using both of them simultaneously. They're using the one to actually find high-level data, but they try to explore using the real-time database of keeping it around to do really fast sync for small areas, like scores, for example. All right, now we come to the nitty-gritty, the data model in Datastore, right, or Firestore. So Firestore's biggest difference is how it structures your data. There's this notion of collections and documents. So collections are really groups of documents. Think of it as the folder in which all your papers go. And your document is an individual piece of content that's classified, that's collected in the inside that collection. And you can have, within a document, you can have a reference to another sub-collection. So that's how you would actually expand out and get complex data structures. At the same time, your document could also have just data objects, right? You can have a data object that doesn't have to be a collection in itself. Documents are just key-value pairs. And finally, the kind of intuitive guidance they give you is think about always designing your app to have large collections of data, right? But small documents, meaning that one collection can have lots of records. Each record should be as small as possible if you really want it to be fast and efficient. Here's an example of what that should look like. Users is a collection, and a Loveless is a document. Documents can be referenced by name or path. So when you're actually referencing it in your code, you could do the equivalent of, here DD is the reference to the Firebase code. We'll see how you get that data. Do a .collection user, .document Loveless, that gives you a reference to that document, and now you can rewrite to whatever you want on it. Or you can still use the Firebase RealTime Database style path mechanism where you can address it by a path that's created by demarcating the collection names and document names. So far, so good? Okay. I hope you can read this. Again, all of this code is in those code labs, so hopefully this is just for me to talk about it. First steps now. All right, so now you've set up your Android Studio, talk to Firebase. You're all set to go. How do you get started? So in yours, first thing you're going to do is you're going to get an instance of the Firebase data store. So you just get an instance of it that's at 1. And at this point, once you've got a reference, you want to start adding data to the database, right? You have two options. You can go directly to the backend and go into the database as admin and add stuff there, or you can do it programmatically. If you're doing it programmatically, you literally do firestore.collection, name it, and that creates a collection. It's an implicit creation. If it didn't exist, it creates it for you. If it existed, it gets that and gets back the reference to it. Same way, when you want to add a restaurant, you just go pick the collection that you created and add the block folder, right? If that existed, it automatically gets created. It just creates it and then puts it into the database for you. Second, synchronization. So by default, Firestore is just a data store, right? So you have two ways in which you can get data back to you. One is, in both of them you're going to do a query. But when you do a query, oh, actually I missed one. Up there, 4. How do you do a query? When you do a query, you can actually, and we'll go into details of these a little bit later, but this kind of immediately, if you use real-time Firebase RealTime Database, you'll notice that it's slightly different. You can now literally, clearly, readably write your query, right? You can say, get me from this collection called restaurants, find me data, order it by this field, and that order that should be sorted in ascending, and limited to the first X records, right? So you actually have a little bit more granular control over how you do this. And we'll look into the details of the query later. But now I want to stop for a second about your two options. When you have a database and you're getting data back from it, there are two kinds of things you want to do. One is you just want to get a one-time, let me retrieve data and I'm done. I really don't want to keep it in sync. I just want to get it, populate it, and move on. Think of it like a first-time data retrieval, right? The second is where you're like, I want real-time data sync, that every change on the results of my query, if they change on the database on the server side, I need those pushed to me. With Firestore, just like a real-time database, you can support both of them. If you use events and sync, like you basically register an event listener for changes, then you're doing real-time sync, or you can use the get method to just get the data and you have not registered anything. This code really is showing you how you would write a Firebase adapter that binds to your recycler view, so you can actually have that data binding done automatically. And in that adapter, if you set up these event change listeners, now every time your query changes on the server, the results of your query change, those change events are propagated to your client for you. You didn't have to write any code. All you do is handle them. And because your adapter knows how to update your view when that data changes, it kind of becomes a seamless ripple-through interaction, right? There are only 3 events that are of importance. One is you get change events when a new document gets added to the query that you started. So your query, you already made a query. Now there's a new result on the back end that matches the query. You will get a change event that says something was added. If someone removed a document that was in your query result set, that's another change event. And finally, if things were modified. So if you this is just deep diving into how you would handle each one of those, and it was literally just to show you that, those are the events and this is how you handle them. The only thing you need to notice is query snapshot is the object that comes back to you with all the results set, and inside that you can get document changes, and each one of those document change would contain the type of change and an access pointer to the actual document that you can then use to get data. We're not going to go into all of this because I'm almost close to time. Sort, filter, and limit. All right, so now you've got your data, you've bound it in, and because you've used this setup with a listener, your client side is going to update. So now if you actually go into the backend database and update data, you'll find that your front end updates seamlessly. If any of you are interested, the demo is running on my laptop, so after this, please come by. You're more than welcome to play with it. But the most important thing here is that when you update the query, those query changes, like any update to the query you do on the client side, actually also ripples through and updates the query on the server, so it's automatically performant for the next set of data that comes through. And this is what happens when you want to do sorts, right? Or when you want to kind of basically say, I want to apply a filter, I start with this query, I'm giving the user a UI where you can change the criteria by which I want to do the fetch. Now I'm like, okay, I'm changing this. So with 3 things you want to talk about here. You want to sort the data, you want to filter it, and then there's also you want to limit it. Limiting is just saying, this many pieces of information. So actually, we'll go in order. First is you want to basically filter the data. Unlike real-time database, you actually have these where conditions. So you can basically say things like, on that query, filter and reduce the result set to only things that match that category attribute with that value. So the ability to do equal to matches, right, is part of the methods that are already provided. There are going to be more complex filter criteria applied, hopefully. So it's a start. But this allows you to do quick and dirty matching to filter based on various attribute values greater than, less than, equal to in your code. Second, once you've got that, the same query object that you would apply that filter to, you can also go in and then say, hey, order this, ascending, descending, get it pre-sorted for you, come back, and finally limit it, right? And so far, this seems like fairly straightforward. We didn't have anything major that we had to think about. But there is this one nice feature that I really love. Now that you can actually do complex queries, because you can chain these, right? You can say where this, dot where this, where this, where this, and you can chain the number of criteria you use for filtering. You now have a query that might be queried across multiple fields. You could not do that easily with real-time database before. Now you can. But that means that you need indexing. And by default, the database doesn't have indexing. But, and this was so beautiful, what it does is it actually throws an error in your studio along with a link that you click that is pre-set up to provide the creation context for that composite index. So if you write code for a query that's complex and you didn't have that index in your backend, your error will actually show you a link. Click on that link, it takes you straight into your backend console, shows you this little thing that says, is this the index you want to add? You say yes, you're done. It takes a little time for the index to kick in. But this is genius to me because it removes also this thing that, did I set up a duplicate index? Did it already exist, etc. Right? So it's kind of pretty cool. So you have indexing. Finally, transactions. So in this app that we were talking about, we had this restaurant, which was one entity, one data collection, that had records, documents for restaurants, and it had in each document an average rating for the restaurant. But now you also want to collect individual ratings and aggregate, average them, and put the average into this. That requires you, so if someone added a new rating, that would require you to first update the ratings collection with that new data, then go read all of it, find the average, write it to the restaurant record, and if you didn't do it atomically, you could have race conditions, you could have inconsistent data on different clients, you could have lots of chaos, right? The nice thing is that with Firestore, they have transactions built in. That was very, very cool. So if you kind of look at this, up top, you can create a task that basically does the whole transaction, and then just listen for updates on the task. When the transaction completes, you get notified. You can then use the notification, say, okay, the transaction is complete, now I can do other things with my UI. The second part is where you actually get the transaction, right? So you have a transaction on the restaurant reference object, then you can kind of add other transactions to it. So you can see at the bottom, it's like actually expanded only that part, which says, hey, these are the two transactions that should be atomically committed to the Firestore. So I'm going to set restaurant ref being the reference to the restaurant object, along with the data that needs to go into that. Here's the ratings object, reference again is retrieved either by path or by name, and here is the updated data for that. And when you commit this to Firestore, that task ensures both get committed at one shot and you get notified only when that atomically completes. Does that make sense? Okay. And finally, I think this is the final one. All of this means nothing if you don't have security, right? So initially when you set up your Firestore, if you did nothing else, you just get this default. So if you didn't touch the security rules at all, it'll allow anyone to read and write your data. So by default, it'll kind of nudge you to say, at least make sure it's authenticated people doing it. So that's what you do. But that's not enough. You don't want people clobbering each other's data after they log in. Firebase with Datastore, you have granular security controls that you can set through rules. And you can see, one of the things that I wanted you to kind of check in this is that rules are nested. So you write and rules are very clearly or simplistic rules that you provide. At the top level, here are the rules for the entire database. You need to be authenticated to do anything here. And then you kind of walk down to the next level of nesting and say, at the top level, this collection or this document, I would like you to tighten the rules up by this amount. So in this case, it says the top level says you just need to be authenticated, but the restaurant says, hey, an authenticated user can update this, but you can't delete it, right? So I'm going to prevent you from deleting it, but you can update it if you're an authenticated user. And then when you kind of go down further to the ratings, it'll say, hey, not only can you can't go clobber other people's ratings, you can only change the rating that you put in, and you can delete other stuff, right? So you can tighten all of these. Rules, if I'm totally honest, is the one part of Firebase that really kind of either you will hate or you will love. And I'm kind of sitting on hate, but I'm moving towards love because it's complicated, right? You need to know how to structure them in a way that's the most effective. But there's a lot of stuff coming out for it, and this is where I really hope to focus on in other kind of deep dives on this space. But I'm going to wrap it up really quickly. The only thing that's left to talk about is why is this different from the real-time database. So here's kind of what they kind of have pitched as the reasons. And I say they because I haven't played with enough with both of them to be able to tell if this is true. But at a very high level, you can go read the document that they have. Like, the number one thing they want to kind of say is Firebase is the favored child of the future, right? this is the guy who's going to be evolved and upgraded. So if you are using RealTime Database right now, you want to start considering a path towards Firestore. There is no migration. There is no migration of the data models just don't sync up, right? So you can't do that. But also consider it's in beta right now. So you might want to keep an eye on it and figure out where they want to go. You can mix and match the models. Here are the main criteria. Readiness. Firestore is in beta. Firebase is, the RealTime Database is totally established. Firestore offers offline support for mobile and web. RealTime only for native. Scalability. Firebase Data Store is backed by the cloud, so it automatically scales for a lot of things. Here you need to manually shard it as you kind of grow the number of clients. Querying. Firebase Data Store allows complex queries, like you can join different applications and create a complex query to change them together. In Firebase RealTime Database, it's really, really limited. You do a lot of the manual labor to do the chaining yourself. Finally, transactions. RealTime Database doesn't have anything but a very basic kind of notion of a transaction. Again, you have to manage it a lot yourself. Whereas in the Firestore, they've abstracted it out into a really nice, quick and dirty usable API. So, these are my goals. And this is my recap. And I always hate being the person before lunch. If you want me to talk for another 10 minutes, I'm really good at it, but I won't do it. But ideally, I wanted you to take just 3 things away from this. Hopefully, I can kind of pass it across. One is understand why you want to use Firebase. If you're a developer, either to a direct customer or indirectly to a customer through a business intermediary, why you should use Firebase. Second is, what are the new things that came out that if you've already used Firebase that you might want to look at. And finally, here are the big things that you want to think about when it comes to Cloud Firestore, and if you're playing with it, why you might want to explore it as opposed to using RealTime Database. These are all the resources you can look at. They're in the slides. There is the code labs, actually, I think, yeah, here. The 4 code labs here are all Android related, but if you're a web developer, there are equivalents for most of them except for analytics. Huge fan of Firecast, I would recommend you watch them. And I think that's about it. If you want the slides, they're over there. I will also be posting the link onto Twitter. And I think I am about out of time. Thank you for listening.